Welcome to the Honest Healing Podcast, real talk for cycle breakers. I'm your host, Katie Delamon. If you're ready to speak up, set boundaries, heal your nervous system, and build better relationships, you're in the right place. Because you don't need to be perfect to heal. You just need to be honest. Let's go. Welcome to episode 6 of the Honest Healing Podcast. Life doesn't calm down until you do. The science of stress. This episode was inspired by my keynote presentation that I just gave this afternoon called The Science of Stress. In that keynote, I did go a little bit more deep into the nervous system and neuroscience, which I will touch briefly on in this episode, but I really just want to dive into this term stress, and I hope this episode empowers you and leaves you knowing that you have full control over your life, your body, your circumstances, and the stress that gets put on your body. I know that might seem maybe triggering for some people, but hopefully by the end of the episode, it feels a little bit more empowering. I saw a statistic that said 90% of all physician visits are stress-related illnesses. I think this is probably more than 90% because we are all so stressed. But it's not our life circumstances that are creating the stress. It's our inability to regulate our dysregulated nervous system and the fact that we do have way more information, way more technology, way more distractions now, more than we ever have. So yes, our life circumstances were not meant for all this overwhelming information. This is very new, so our body is trying to adapt. I do believe that we can live in and of this age of technology and not get swept away and not be completely dysregulated. But it does require effort and getting uncomfortable. I just want you to take a moment here, maybe close your eyes, or maybe just stare at something down at the ground, or if you're at a table or something. If you're driving, obviously, please do not close your eyes. If you can close your eyes, great, or stare down at the ground. Focusing the eyes, because wherever the eyes go, the mind goes. So closing them might be a little bit easier. And I just want to ask you a few questions. And these questions might be triggering for some people, but again, hopefully this is more empowering for you to take a step back and look at your stress from a different perspective and a different lens. First of all, I want you to think about the most stressful area of your life right now. Is it your finances? Is it your relationship with your partner? Maybe it's a relationship with a family member or a friend. Maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's one kid in particular. Maybe it's the work environment that you're in. Maybe it's your health. I want you to think about one specific area, one big stressor in your life, and I want you to ask yourself these questions. I want you to answer them honestly, and I do not want you to be avoiding anything. This is all about honest healing. Number 1, how are you contributing to this stress? And now you might be thinking, well, Katie, what do you mean contributing? I'm not contributing to the inflation. I'm not contributing to the demands of my job. I'm not contributing that having 3 kids is full on. No. How are you contributing to the stress? By your beliefs and your boundaries. Because these are 2 things that you have full control over. And I will say that your belief around this stress is going to be the biggest part of why you have this stress, because you feel like maybe you need a certain amount of money, or maybe your life needs to look a certain way or feel a certain way, and you need to have certain things and do certain things. And more than likely, you're also trying to control a lot of situations, I would say all of them, that you have no control over. You only have control over you. It's a loss of control, which is a belief and a mindset. And then your boundaries. Where do you have boundaries in place when it comes to this really stressful thing? If you have boundaries in place, it wouldn't be a stressor. The second question is, how are you asking for help? How often are you asking for help? When are you asking for help? And who are you asking for help? So often we're asking the wrong people for help for the situations that we're in. And a lot of the times we're asking for help at the wrong time. So Say you might get really frustrated because your partner isn't participating, or maybe you feel like they're not putting in as much work as you are with the kids. So at night, you have a little moment where you get angry, you get upset, totally okay. But it's because you're frustrated and resentful from all the things that were happening throughout the day that you never said anything about. So at night, you explode. And so it have to happen if you were to put intentions in, let's say at the beginning of the day, and ask for help. My next question. How much are you spending to alleviate the stress? What do you mean spending, Katie? How much are you spending time on this to alleviate it? How much energy are you spending on it to alleviate it? And how much money are you spending on it to alleviate it? And yes, I'm putting money in there because money, one, motivates people. Two, it makes people uncomfortable. And that is the entire point. You do not grow through comfort. I will talk about the connected state and feeling good and grounded in your body. But if you want to widen your window of tolerance, I'll explain what that is. You will have to get uncomfortable. That's just how it is. And money is one of those things. And I can speak from very personal experience. Money has been one of the biggest ways that I have widened my window of tolerance in so many areas of my life, not just with my business, but also with my relationship with my partner, with my relationship with myself, with so many things. Money has been the driving key force for my nervous system to expand its window of tolerance and to build resilience. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I want you to just take another moment or two if you still have your eyes closed and think about this area of your life that you're so stressed about that you just can't, wrap your head around. How are you contributing to the stress with your beliefs and boundaries? How are you asking for help? How often, when, and with whom? And how much are you spending time, energy, and money to alleviate it? I always say when you point your finger, you have three pointing right back at you. So when we try to blame someone or something else for the way we feel, we got to take a closer look and clean up our side of the street. And that's what I want to focus on this episode. Any of you out there, do you or have you ever woken up at 3 in the morning and you just cannot get back to bed? Why is this? It's because of your cortisol levels, aka you don't know how to manage your stress, aka you have a dysregulated nervous system. 3 in the morning, everybody in the world starts producing cortisol. Cortisol is not the devil, but yes, it is all silently killing us because we don't know how to manage our cortisol. It's not that cortisol is bad. Cortisol is great in small spurts, which we need it. But we all start producing it at about 2 or 3 in the morning. Cortisol helps us wake, and it also regulates our adrenal glands, which is our energy levels, and it also regulates our stress response. When we don't know how to manage our stress, we have higher cortisol levels. So if we already have really high cortisol levels, compared to somebody who knows how to regulate their nervous system and they just have a normal amount of cortisol, when cortisol starts dumping into your bloodstream at 2 or 3 in the morning, the person with high cortisol level is, of course, gonna wake up at a lot earlier time, a lot quicker, and probably in that fight or flight state. If you're somebody who knows how to regulate your nervous system, you're gonna wake up at a decent time feeling all right. This is why you wake up at 3 in the morning and you cannot get back to bed. It's because of your cortisol levels. You are not managing your stress properly. I want you to take a note of some of the phrases I'm about to say and see if you or anybody around you has ever said anything like this. And I want you to remember that you become who you're around. So if you're hanging around people that are also thinking and talking in these ways, that's going to have an effect on you. But I hear so many people always say, I will deal with life when it calms down, or I'll deal with that when life calms down. You might say something like, I'll focus on my stress once the kids are back in school. I'll take care of myself after I finish the degree. I'll start regulating my nervous system once my job isn't so demanding. I'll do the inner work when my partner finally changes or when they go to therapy. Or I'll prioritize my own mental health after my parent gets better. Or the best one is once I've saved enough money, fill in the blank, whatever that enough is, then I'll have a peace of mind. These are moving targets. One stressor fades, another takes its place. And I don't know if you've been around the block today or yesterday, but life is getting way more hectic, way more distracted. It is not going to calm down until you do. You're stuck in a cycle waiting to feel better instead of creating the conditions for it now. Stress doesn't go away because life gets easier. Stress goes away because you've built the inner capacity to meet life with more regulation, resilience, and clarity, no matter what's happening around you. This doesn't mean you will not experience stressors and you won't get a dysregulated nervous system. Regulating your nervous system is about bringing yourself back into a connected state, knowing when you're in those dysregulated states in a more efficient and effective manner. Burnout doesn't happen because of stress. It happens because you ignore your capacity and you don't know your capacity until it's obviously at that burnout stage. You override your body signals. You power through when you should just pause. You live in reaction instead of intention, and you keep doing more instead of doing things more mindfully or doing less things more mindfully, I should say. Stress isn't the enemy. The disconnection from yourself is. And so, a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate about this whole stress, nervous system regulation thing. It literally has changed my life for the better in every way, shape, or form, physically, mentally, emotionally, in every relationship, including my partnership with my husband, has only deepened and gotten better because I know how to regulate my nervous system. When I was 26 years old, I was burnt out and I had no idea. I I would have never said I was stressed. I didn't have any kids. I didn't have a mortgage. I liked my job. I was never overworking. I didn't quote unquote feel stressed, but you want to know how I know I was stressed looking back through the lens of nervous system regulation? My body was screaming with red flags. Your body will always tell you through symptoms. If you are experiencing physical, mental, emotional symptoms of dysregulation, that is your body saying, hey, we're stressed. I'm going to show up through a physical symptom. Your physical symptoms are messages. My body was screaming because I had anxiety, panic attacks, chronic fatigue, IBS for 30 years, constantly having a cold or a flu or allergies or eczema, low energy, zero motivation. I was in toxic relationships. My weight would fluctuate from 45 to 58 kilos or anywhere from 100 to 130 pounds. Nothing ever worked when it came to my weight. I would always try the latest and the greatest, like diet and exercise. The only time I ever felt that I could lose weight is when I literally would almost starve myself because I was so stressed and not eating. I would have mood swings. I'd be overreacting all the time, shutting down. I was resentful. I was angry, but pretending to be fine. I wasn't just tired, my nervous system was dysregulated. But about 10 years ago, like when I was 29, 30, I started to learn about the nervous system and about regulation, mostly through yoga and meditation and mindfulness. But everything in my life has completely changed in the past 12 years. I have way more energy than I've ever had in my life. I literally never thought it was possible to wake up in the morning and to actually have energy. And honestly, that didn't kick in until probably about a year or two ago, and I'm 39 years old. I never had energy in the morning. And I actually do now. And I wake up without an alarm clock. I used to sleep through like at least three alarm clocks. I would just snooze and snooze and snooze and snooze. I didn't think I would ever be able to live a life without the snooze button. Bought a digital alarm clock, so I no longer have my phone in my room. That's been a few years, and that's been a game changer. But I've got no more IBS, no more panic attacks, my health issues. Like literally, I never get sick. If I do, it lasts a very short amount of time. And I'm never obsessing over my diet, my exercise, or my weight or anything. And my weight has not changed in the past 10 years, no matter what I've done. So I'm not special. I'm not saying I'm special at all. I just know how to regulate my nervous system. And I know that you can too, that it's available to anybody and everybody. And that's what I hopefully help people do, is inspire them and empower them to know that they have control over these things in their life, regardless of what's going on around them. So the nervous system. I'm not going to go too crazy into detail about the nervous system, as I'll probably do a whole episode on that because I have a whole program on it where I break each of the nervous system states down and go into all of it. It's called the Nervous System Reboot. If I'll put a link in the show notes. And if you're wondering about it and how it might help you, just send me an email. And you've got the autonomic nervous system, which most people are talking about when it comes to the nervous system. The nervous system is everything. It is the one system in your body that is literally your life force. So it's your brain, your spinal cord, and all your nerve endings. Why is this so important? Because your nervous system is your breathing, respiration, body temperature, heart rate, and blood pressure. I don't know if you're aware of this, but if any of those go too high or too low, you're dead. That's the nervous system's job, is to keep you alive. It also surveillances and recognizes any threats or danger. So again, it's literally keeping you alive. It regulates your physiological and emotional responses, aka the health of all your relationships. So the health of your nervous system will reflect in your relationships, point blank. If you have a dysregulated nervous system, it's going to show up in, if not all your relationships, definitely the ones closest to you. It also is where you process information and send and receive messages to the body, and it regulates your organs, your muscles, your hormones, which is so important, your glands, your reproduction, and your digestive. So I believe all IBS issues have to do with nervous system dysregulation. I know for me, that was my number one thing. I had IBS for 30 years. I never thought it was possible to use a bathroom every day. I didn't think it was. And I went to plenty of GI doctors in New York City that said, oh, maybe you're not going to be regular every day. That's just how some people are. Bullshit to that. It's is possible, and I am regular, and I live through a lens of regulation. I do not do anything in this world if I know that I'm going to be too dysregulated. I know there's some situations in life where it will cause me a bit of dysregulation, but I know that I can handle it. I'm not going to ever put my body into a state of dysregulation for anybody or anything. But remember that the nervous system is doing whatever it needs to do to keep you safe, not happy. Happiness is possible and joy is possible, but you are the one training yourself for that. So I may have talked about the cycle of information before on a podcast, but basically all of the information around you is coming in through your senses, through your nerve endings. So it's coming into your body. Your body's then going to bring all those sensations up to the brain for processing. And then it's going to go back into your memory bank of what that sensation meant and what in your past it meant, and then how you should respond. And then that information is sent back down to your body for you to respond and to react. This is happening all day, every day, very quickly. I went through that quite slow, but this is happening in the body within, milliseconds. It is happening so fast that we don't even realize or think that we have control over it, but we do. So when we slow down and get quiet enough, still enough, we start to notice the sensations that come into the body. They go up to the head for processing. We start to know what are we associating with that sensation. And then we bring that information back down to the body, and then we start to respond. And we start to get to know our body and how we're responding and why do we have these patterns and why do we have these habits. It's the way our nervous system is wired. So when you think of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, so many people are just aware of the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic. So many people talk about the sympathetic being, the gas pedal. Most people think of it as the fight or flight response, which it is. And that's where your saliva is inhibited. So you're going to get a dry mouth. You're not going to be able to breathe deeply into the belly because your bronchi actually relaxes. Your heart rate increases, your digestion slows. It stimulates glucose release, which we know is not good because that's your insulin, and we don't want your insulin spiking all the time. It's also going to constrict your intestinal muscles, and it actually All the blood out of your intestines go to your limbs so that you can get away really fast. This is our survival mechanism. The other side of your nervous system, well, one part of it, I'm going to break it down a little bit more deeply according to polyvagal theory. The parasympathetic nervous system. This is when your heart rate slows. Everybody, talks about it as stepping on the brake pedal. It's when you exhale, the heart rate slows down and it stimulates digestion. This is why it's called the rest, digest, and heal. Now, I like to go a little bit deeper into the nervous system regulation because I believe it is a lot more intricate than that. I go off of the polyvagal theory, and I believe the guy's name is Stephen Porges, Porges. I could be butchering his name, but he actually breaks down the nervous system into four states that I believe it really is. Now, he talks about the ventral vagal, which is your connected state, I call it. You can think of it as your parasympathetic if you want. Then the sympathetic, which is your fight or flight. And then these other two states, which I believe we actually sit in more, but because people are so unaware and so used to it, and you get praised for it in society, we don't actually recognize it and we don't actually work on it because it feels so normal. And what those two states are, it's fawn response and freeze and shutdown, which he calls dorsal vagal, which is when your parasympathetic gets too pushed down, like you actually shut down. And you can kind of think of this as a ladder that you're in the connected state. You go into fight or flight, you might go into fawn, and below that is your freeze and shutdown. Now, if you're in freeze or shutdown, you actually have to go up the ladder and get into a bit of into a sympathetic state and do something uncomfortable in order to bring yourself back into your connected state. So just because you're in one of these states does not mean you're never going to be able to be regulated again. Regulation is about resilience. It's being able to move efficiently through these different states. Now, I'm going to briefly go through each state and how you might feel in each state. I'm not going to break down the full science part of it because it could get a little boring and lengthy on a podcast. But if that's something you do want to hear more about, I am a bit of a science geek and I have a whole nervous system reboot program on it. But just to give you an idea of what this feels like, and sometimes when you talk about things in the mind and body, people can relate to it a little bit better. So when you're in the connected state, you feel calm and present, like you can trust yourself and your decisions. You enjoy spending time with the people that you care about. You're capable of handling challenges. You feel grounded, steady. You feel like yourself, right? You're able to think clearly and make decisions. When you're in a fight or flight state, you might be very antsy to make a decision. You don't know what to do. Your thoughts are racing. You can't slow down. You can't relax. You have to do everything right now. What if everything goes wrong? You're thinking you might be anxious. You might be worried. You might be afraid. You might have this really strong need to control. You might get angry and frustrated and annoyed, and you might even start to think that people are mad at you. When we go down into the fawn state, this is the people-pleasing state, and most people don't want to consider themselves people pleasers, but I hate to break it to you, a lot of us are. I for sure have tendencies of people pleasing in my life show up, but I would say I probably tend to be more of the shutdown and the flight are my sort of go-tos. I find that my husband is more probably the fight and fawn. But look, we're all different and one is not better or worse. It's just to recognize where your nervous system is and then what to do to get out of it. So when you're in the fawn state, this is where I just want everybody to be happy. It's easier if I don't ask for what I need. I'll just go along with whatever they want. You might feel guilty for saying no. You feel like you have to fix things so no one can get upset. If they're okay, then I'm okay. I can't express how I really feel, and I'm afraid that they'll leave if I don't keep the peace. That's what fawn mode is. Now, shutdown feels like everything is just hard and impossible. Things are never going to change. You might be sleeping a lot or always tired. You could feel depressed or disconnected. You can feel alone or like you don't have anybody, that it's difficult to think or to speak. You might feel shame. You might feel hopeless, or it's like you're not even really there. Some shutdown can go all the way into disassociation, where you actually basically leave your body and just like you're not there at all. You might zone out, you have a lot of brain fog. Now, freeze mode, most of the time, is a little bit of the sympathetic and a little bit of the parasympathetic. It's where you have the gas and the brake on both at the same time. So if you think about freeze, you can kind of think about that deer in headlight, that you're actually alive and like your heart might be racing because you're scared and you're nervous and you're anxious, that sympathetic state, but you're frozen. So you're stepping, your parasympathetic nervous system is also like in full gear. So that's where you procrastinate. So freeze mode is all about procrastination. This is why so many people procrastinate. And it is a response from your childhood. And I talked about the childhood trauma in the last episode. You can go back and listen to that. But I'll just give you an idea of what this sort of looks like. When you were younger and you were faced with an overwhelming situation, more than likely you couldn't fight because you were a little kid. You couldn't flee because you were living with your parents. And you couldn't fawn because you probably didn't even have the language or the literacy for it yet. So your body went into freeze and or shutdown, and it's remembering that response to deal with anything stressful. So say you want to start something that you're really passionate about, but you have this fear of failure. You have this fear of rejection. You have this fear of it not working out. You have a fear of being judged. You have a fear of spending the money and taking the risk. You have all these fears coming out. You're going to get stuck in that freeze mode because that's what feels familiar. And I say this in my nervous system reboot, your nervous system will always prioritize a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. What does that mean? Your familiar hell can be the chaos, can be the procrastination, could be that sympathetic nervous system. But because that feels normal from what you've been used to, that's actually your baseline of safety. You're going to prioritize that over the uncomfortable hell, which could be the stuff that's really healthy for you, that's actually really going to create change and better relationships. But because it's different than what you normally do, it's really uncomfortable. So it's actually the uncomfortable heaven. This is the biggest thing about the nervous system, that remember, it's there to keep you safe, not to keep you happy. So if your baseline is dysregulation, you're going to, in order to regulate it, have to get uncomfortable. That's just the way it is. Now, I want to go back to the fawn mode and talk about that 80% of people with autoimmune diseases are women. This is research from Dr. Gabor Mate, and he says he found that people with autoimmune diseases show these four big signs of the fawn mode in full effect. They put other people's needs before their own. They're the nice one, which means they're repressing healthy anger. They over-identify with roles, duties, and responsibilities, like being a mom and taking care of everybody else. And they feel responsible for how others feel. This is your fawn mode in full effect. Another statistic that I saw recently was Elizabeth Gilbert talking about it, how statistically married women die younger, are more likely to be victims of homicide, suicide, car accidents, alcohol and drug abuse. And the opposite is true for men. Men actually live longer if they're married than men who are single. And this, again, to me, just shows fawn response in full effect. Their nervous system is just stuck in fawn response, not because they're bad people, but because their nervous system is dysregulated, and our society praises us being the good girl and the good human instead of being an empowered woman who has boundaries. Boundaries are not bad, boundaries are healthy, and they're bridges. You can have a strong back, strong boundaries, and a soft front where you can ask for what you need with vulnerability and softness. So that's the four states. Now, these are some signs to tell if you have a dysregulated nervous system. You're not going to be able to breathe down into your belly. You're going to have abnormal breathing, anxiety, heightened sensitivity to stimuli, thrill-seeking behavior, workaholism, toxic relationships, skin and digestive issues, immune and hormonal imbalances, hypervigilance, which means you're super aware of everything, mood swings and sleep issues, extreme cravings and appetite changes, as well as chronic pain and chronic attention and concentration issues. Now, the causes for dysregulation, kind of going back to my last episode, is definitely going to be trauma and adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, which I didn't actually touch on, but I'll probably talk about in another episode. Stress, poor diet, lack of sleep, exercise, lack of sun, caffeine, alcohol, toxins, nutrient deficiencies, constant exposure to technology, genetics, and health conditions. I believe every symptom in your body is a sign, signal, and message. When you have pain anywhere, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, that is an acronym for pay attention inward now. Your body is telling you through symptoms what it needs, what it doesn't need, what you need more of, and what you need less of. And to go back, the caffeine component of the dysregulation. Now, if you're dumping caffeine, if you're putting coffee into your digestive tract or your stomach, first thing in the morning when your cortisol is already at its highest, you are just dumping gasoline onto the fire. If you want to drink coffee in the morning or any caffeine, at least get something in the belly so it can absorb it. If you're putting caffeine on an empty stomach, especially for a woman going through her changes and menopause, all that stuff, that is one of the worst things you do is put caffeine on an empty stomach. So that's at least one thing that you can try to do differently. Now, the myth about regulation is that you're just going to feel calm and peaceful all the time. It's not true. Nervous system regulation is about resilience, the ability to move efficiently through life stressors and return to a baseline of safety and balance. It's about widening your window of tolerance. You can handle what life brings you. That doesn't mean you don't get dysregulated. And I'm just going to give you two examples of my own personal life. I didn't go to the gym for 7 years. My body was in so much shutdown that I had no motivation whatsoever. And I even had free membership to these gyms because I was a yoga teacher. Yes, I was doing yoga, but never a personal practice at home. I would teach yoga, and I honestly never went to yoga classes. I was not doing anything physical for my body. I started to have all these physical things happen. Like I had plantar fasciitis in both feet for almost 2 years, which was so painful. I started getting posterior tibial tendonitis, which is also in the foot. And I don't run. I wasn't doing any exercise to strain it. It was just happening because I was losing muscle mass. I also started having a lot of scoliosis, like flare-ups, and just being uncomfortable with my back issues. And so I knew that money motivates me. It also makes me uncomfortable, but it expands my window of tolerance. So I said, right, what's one thing I could do that's super uncomfortable, but that can ease me back into working out to a point where I love it and like it and want to do it on my own because it feels good. I said, right, I'm going to hire a personal trainer and I'm only going to work out for that 1 hour a week. I'm not going to make myself go to the gym because once I do, I'm going to get annoyed, I'm going to get frustrated, and I'm going to just say screw it. So I paid $120 a week, which is a lot of money. I had to pick up extra shifts at work. I had to put up a lot of boundaries. I was very uncomfortable spending that much money on myself. I was very uncomfortable to even tell my husband I was spending that much money. on it because we're trying to save up for another property. But I did it for myself because I knew that was the only thing that was going to get me to the point where I needed to be. I needed to be uncomfortable. So, and also I hired a 56-year-old trainer, not a 21-year-old. She's actually 59 now. She was 56 at the time. She had a child at 42. Karen, shout out, love you. She's amazing. And I went 1 hour a week. That's it. I didn't do anything else. And I said, I'm only ever going to do more when I want to do more. I spent an entire year doing that. I spent almost $7,000. I'm not a dum dum. I could have done YouTube videos. I could have probably personally trained myself, but it wasn't about that. It was about being consistent. It was about getting uncomfortable. And it was knowing that just doing 1 hour a week was enough. And I had to be okay with that. And so now, after that year, I then said, right, I'm going to then now go to a gym and I'm going to pay. Actually, my gym membership is half the price of my 1 hour a session, and I have sauna, cold plunges, and the whole 9 yards. So I said, right, I will pay for a membership, but that means I am going to go, and I'm only going to go 3 days a week. Nothing more. If I want to go more, sure, I've got the saunas and cold plunges if I want to go more. But I'm not going to put that pressure on myself because it's just not possible for me and my lifestyle. I'm not going to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I don't think that's sustainable or something for me. And that was almost 3 years ago. I've gone to the gym every single week, not bragging. And for the first year of working out, I didn't lift more than 2.5 kilos. That's like 5 pounds. And I'm not even kidding. And that's because people were like, oh, that's because you were working with a trainer and she knew what she was doing. I was like, no, she kept telling me, you can go up, you can go up. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't want to go more. I just want to get strong with this and then move on. Like I still only use 5 kilos for most things. I don't go crazy and I have never had an injury. And even when I go on vacation, I actually crave doing movement and doing physical exercise, which I never have before. I never have used a gym ever in my life while traveling until about a year or two ago. And now I will only book places where I know that I can have a bit of a workout or potentially a restorative like sauna or cold plunge or something. I don't just wait for the moments of recovery to happen, I schedule them into my lifestyle. They become my new normal. So that's a little personal example. And actually, I'm going to give you another one. Just this year, this December, within a week span, I found out that the man who raised me is not my biological father. I had a rupture in my marriage, which was not just a little fight. This was a rupture. And I'm not going to go into it about it, but this was a rupture that I wasn't sure we were going to be able to repair. And that same week, we also put in a bid for an investment property and we got it. And we put it in quite randomly and it wasn't really thought about. It actually wasn't talked about much. And so within a week, all this that was happening in my life, and it was a lot. I'm not going to lie. Like I had a dysregulated nervous system. I had not been that dysregulated in a long time. But you know what? It didn't knock me down. It didn't make my life overwhelming. I was still able to regulate because I put up boundaries. I knew what was happening in my body and I knew where to say no. I knew where to ask for help, who to ask for help from. And I knew where to spend time, money, and energy to help alleviate the stress that was happening. So you can always regulate a dysregulated nervous system. 7 years ago, my husband had a stroke that almost killed him. You don't think that dysregulated my nervous system? Absolutely. Did I gain weight, lose weight, or, did it turn my life upside down? Absolutely not. It's not going to. I'm not saying that I'm never going to get dysregulated, but it's never going to knock me to a point where I'm going to be wildly dysregulated and not be able to get back to a state of regulation. The last thing I'm going to talk about with polyvagal theory is the vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve in your body. It's 80% of your parasympathetic nervous system. So your vagus nerve is your ability to have a regulated nervous system. It links from the bottom of your brain through key organs. So it's in your throat, down into your heart, into your lungs, and all into your gut. And its central role is to regulate your stress, your digestion, and your emotional balance. And we can actually test our vagal tone. So vagal tone is our ability to measure our nervous system's health. Because your vagus nerve, again, is your stress response, your digestion, your inflammation, and your emotional regulation. And so when somebody has high vagal tone, this is a good thing. So you can not only tone your body, you can tone your vagus nerve. So when somebody has high vagal tone, you're going to see that they're efficient with their stress recovery, they have strong emotional regulation, healthy digestion, better social connection, reduced inflammation, and a balanced heart rate. Somebody who has low vagal tone is going to have poor stress recovery, weakened emotional regulation, digestive issues, social challenges, chronic inflammation, heightened fight or flight, fatigue, brain fog, you name it. How can we measure vagal tone? By our heart rate variability. It's the beat to beat variation in your heart rate. So remember, I said when you inhale, your heart rate increases. When you exhale, the heart rate decreases. The greater the difference between your heart rate at the end of your inhale and the end of your exhale, the higher your vagal tone, aka the longer, slower, deeper breaths, like we covered in episode 4, the better your vagal tone. The more you're breathing into your diaphragm, longer, slower, deeper in and out through your nose, the higher your vagal tone. Again, everything goes back to your breath. And have you ever noticed that wild animals have high vagal tone, which means they can go from a really stressful state into a really calm state very quickly? So most wild animals, if not all, have very high vagal tone. Most domesticated animals do, but some of them you'll see they don't. That's why they get very sick. But when an animal experiences stress, like they're being chased or a big threat, their nervous system kicks into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You see it. But once the threat passes, they shake it off. They rest and they return to calm quickly by shifting back into their parasympathetic state or that ventral vagal. This fast recovery means they have strong vagal tone. Why? Because they don't overthink, they don't suppress, and they don't stay stuck in the chronic stress loops like humans do. The reason why we have stress and anxiety is because we're overthinking, suppressing, staying stuck, and I would say we're just avoiding something. There is no stress when you're not avoiding. And that doesn't mean, again, you don't get dysregulated and you don't feel some heightened states in the body, but they don't stay there. They only stay there when you are avoiding. So I would say any stress that's going on in your life, you've got to think about there's something you're avoiding. There's probably multiple things you're avoiding. You're probably avoiding asking for help. You're avoiding spending time, money, and energy on it. You're avoiding your boundaries. You're avoiding your beliefs. You're avoiding something when it comes to stress. That's what your body's telling you. And one of the easiest ways to regulate your nervous system is to do the opposite of what you normally do. This is how you retrain your body. So if you normally avoid something, this is your time to do the opposite. If you're somebody who tends to like fight, get angry, that's when you want to practice stillness and pause before reacting. If you tend to want to flee, I know that's what I used to love to do. You want to stay present and grounded in the discomfort. And if you tend to freeze, you want to take small action or speak up. And if you tend to fawn, where you're putting other people's needs before your own, this is where you start to say no and you honor your own needs. Growth happens in the micro moments of the choice. This is how we rewire safety, not by force, but consistency. Change happens at the speed of safety. Change happens by the speed of safety. You create the environment for your body in this moment. Not tomorrow, not on Monday, not when your parents aren't sick anymore, not when your partner goes to therapy, right now in this present moment. I'll touch a little bit on the neuroscience of stress and what is going on in the brain as well, because the brain obviously is part of the nervous system. And I'm going to definitely be doing episodes on mindfulness and stuff because I'm so obsessed with it. But stress, remember, is also your body's response to your perceived threats or demands, which means you're perceiving it as stress. That doesn't mean it actually is stress. And stress is great in the short term, but it's harmful when it's chronic. Now, this amazing study done, and Kelly McGogano, I don't know how to say her name, she did a TEDx talk on it and she's a psychologist, and everybody was coming to her for stress. And so she started doing this research on stress, and she realized that it wasn't stress that was killing people. It was their perception of stress that was killing them. So they did a research study on 30,000 participants over many, many, many years. So I think it was a very, very long study. And so the people had to answer if they were stressed, high or low, and if they thought stress was a good thing or a bad thing, right? So that was all they had to answer. Those people who claim to have high stress and perceived it to be a threat or a bad thing, of course, had a very high mortality rate. Those people who had low stress and thought it was a good thing or a bad thing also had a higher mortality rate. The people with the lowest mortality rate, premature death, was lowered by 43%, were people who had high stress but didn't think it was a bad thing. Can you believe that? They were still people who said they had stress, but they didn't think that the stress was bad. It's perception. Now, again, this will go back to mindset work, and we'll go through many different episodes on that. But stress in your body, it's your adrenal glands pumping adrenaline in. It's your adrenal triggers also the release of glucose. So I mentioned it a little, but I mean, type 2 diabetes is stress management 101. Type 2 diabetes is not genetics. It's lifestyle, and it's your inability to regulate your glucose levels, which means your stress, your cortisol, is spiking. It's your inability to manage your stress. Your oxygen is sent to your brain for increased alertness, so that means it's taking it out of your breath. The digestion slows, all that stuff. But what's happening in the brain? The main thing is that your prefrontal cortex, this CEO part of your brain, which is your emotional intelligence, your emotional regulation, your maturity, your rational thinking, that part of your brain gets shut off naturally when you go into a stressful state. The back part of your brain, the amygdala, that little fear center of your brain, will light up to say, hey, there's danger. We need to get out of here. So we need to go. And your hypothalamus will send signals to release the stress hormones like cortisol. That's what's happening in your brain when it's stressed. Now, do you ever wonder why you go silent or feel physically unable to speak in moments of high stress or danger? This is because of the Broca's area. So there's a little part in the left side of your brain in that prefrontal cortex area called your Broca's area. It is responsible for your speech production, your motor control of your mouth, and you can experience, obviously, diminished activity in this area. What is the one thing when it comes to stress in the body and stress in the brain, when it comes to neuroscience and nervous system? It's cortisol, but cortisol is not the devil. It's nothing to be feared. It's a natural producing hormone that we all have, and it actually keeps us alive and well. It's our chronic overuse and our inability to regulate our nervous systems. And I want to end today's podcast by empowering you to know that you can reduce your cortisol. You can regulate your nervous system and increase your vagal tone. You can widen your window of tolerance. But how are you complacent in creating the conditions you say that you don't want? Taking personal responsibility and going back to those 3 questions that I asked you at the beginning of this episode is going to help you with your stress. So, what are those 3 questions? How are you contributing to your own stress, your beliefs and boundaries? How are you asking for help? How often, when, and with whom? And how much are you spending to alleviate this so-called stress, your time, your energy, and your money? I hope that serves in some way, shape, or form. If you ever want to know anything else, or if you have any questions about the nervous system, polyvagal theory, vagus nerve, you name it, I love talking about all this stuff. Send me a message if you want to know more about one particular thing that I mentioned in another episode. Please send your request. I always love hearing from you, and this is a platform to serve you. So your requests are always welcome. And of course, if you ever want to learn more about my wild ride from mindlessness to mindfulness, check out my book, Trust the Flames. If you want to check out my self-paced nervous system reboot program, go to my website, www.katiedelamon.com. You can find it there. Or if you want to learn more about working with me one-to-one, where we not only break down the nervous system states, but we get into a little bit more of your boundaries, your self-compassion, your inner child healing, all that good stuff, shadow work. And we actually find a plan that helps you regulate in real time for your schedule and your lifestyle and your nervous system, what feels right for you. Thanks so much. See you next time.